Vanakkam. Good evening to all of you. It's a great pleasure to welcome the guests. And I would like to formally invite Dr. Dharani Dharan, the coordinator of Dravidian Professionals Forum, to take the proceedings forward. May I invite you, Dr. Dharani Dharan.
Thank you, everyone. So when we started DPF, this was the idea. So idea is the lifeblood of any organization. This is what even PTSR says always. So very few movements have lasted for more than hundreds of years. If you look at just the present DMK came out of Dravida Kalaham, and then we had the Justice Party movement, which is more than about 100 years old. And this has made Tamil Nadu very, very unique. Like how Jayaranjan sir and also his fellow colleagues in Planning Commission, Vijay Bhaskar written a book, the Dravidian model, where they talk about, if you look at Gujarat, Maharashtra, they do really well in industrial growth along with Tamil Nadu. If you go to socio-economic growth, then you have Kerala, Himachal Pradesh, they do well. But Tamil Nadu is the only state which have done really, really well in both industrial growth as well as in socio-economic growth. As well as if you go to industrial growth, there's spatial growth of industries. People from all communities and walks of life have developed. And if you look at the graduate enrollment ratio of Tamil Nadu in colleges is about 52%. The OECD average for OECD countries is about 35%. And if you look, the Indian average is 27% and is 27%. And if you look at number of girls in high school in Tamil Nadu, it's about 48%. Indian average is about 22%. And if you look at number of doctors we have in Tamil Nadu, is 4 per 1,000. So we have one doctor per 250 people. So this is above the OECD average. Even in the European Union or in the Western world, very, very few countries have more than 4 doctors per 1,000. Norway, probably Austria, Germany, even France has about 3.3 doctors per 1,000, and Indian average is less than 1. If you look at labor force participation of women, Tamil Nadu probably is one of the best ranking states in India. 19% of women in India participate in labor force. It's so low that India was ranked recently, I think 3-4 days back, that 140th out of 160 countries, on even below countries like Pakistan, and Bangladesh was even ranked 83rd in this ranking. And if today when I was speaking to Erik, Erik told me that he has been to one northern state and then Tamil Nadu, and he saw it was not one country. Then I asked him, do you think the difference was more profound than Bulgaria and Norway? He said, certainly yes. Right? So, and as you know, the Ukraine has lesser per capita GDP than Tamil Nadu as well. So, but the problem is this has to be told to the present generation. What was, so for things for which our previous generation has to struggle, the present generation takes it for granted. Somehow we fail to communicate. And this is one of the reasons why we started DPF, to show what the Dravidian movement has done and what we should do. And this is more important now than ever, because if you look, apart from social justice, we'll have to also fight for the democracy in India. We have electoral bonds where anonymously infinite amount of money could be donated to any political party, but only the ruling political party will know how much has been donated. I think if you look, most democracies have even banned corporate donations, but this is the only country where there is no ban on corporate donation, but you don't even know who's donating. And also, you know, the fiscal federalism is also on the thread, thanks to cess and surcharge. The governors are not absolutely non-partisan. They play to the whims and fancies of the union government. 19 bills in Tamil Nadu has been put on hold by governor. You saw in Maharashtra where for about a year and a half, 18 months, no speaker could be selected, and immediately after the change of regime, the speaker was elected in a single day. So India even can't grow if individual states can't grow, right? Only India is composed of states. So only if states grow, then individual states can grow. I mean, the country can grow. So if you don't give autonomy to the states, then the country definitely can't grow. So so this is what also we've been doing in DPF. We've been having events on federalism, fiscal federalism. We've been having a lot of articles coming in different news media such as the Hindu, the Times of India, the Wire. etc., etc. And apart from all these, we also wanted to bring professionals into party fold, and that's why we kept DPF out of the actual party structure. It's an autonomous organization so that professionals can come, join, and contribute. If you look in India, 99.9% of the professionals are not in politics. And third and final reason for founding DPF was to provide policy solution, evidence-based policy solution. And during the manifesto preparation, DPF played a major role in providing policy inputs. We had about 60 professionals from representing 10 different countries from universities such as Oxford and Harvard, etc. And I'd also like to thank, apart from PTR Palnivil Tyagarajan, my colleague Pugul Gandhi for the excellent work he has done for DPF. And I would like to thank Erik for coming here. So I think, in fact, even in December, Erik joined us for a panel discussion. And I also like to thank Jairanjan sir, who's been of great help. He has always volunteered for DPF activities. In fact, when we started DPF, he was one of the first persons we met and had the discussion. And of course, I shouldn't mention Sundar and Paneer, because without them, I think DPF would have ceased to exist. And I also like to thank the Environment Secretary for coming. Thank you.
Before inviting Erik, I would like my colleague Sundar to hand over memento to both Erik and to our Environment Secretary, please. May I request Jairanjan to hand over a copy of Journey of Civilization to Environment Secretary, please. Now we would like to invite Mr. Erik to share his initial thoughts, and then we can make it an interactive session. Over to you, sir.
Thank you so much. And let me just start by telling you how happy I am to be in Chennai, in the great state of Tamil Nadu, and that COVID has receded so much that again it's possible to travel and interact. I've come here a few times over the last period to see how I can help out on environment issues. But I'm so happy that we can now have meetings and discuss. And there are so many friends in the room. I cannot mention you all, but I have to mention Gopal Krishna and Tara Gandhi, because they are my oldest friends in the room. Gopal was Indian ambassador to Norway, and he was Indian ambassador to Sri Lanka. And we were working so closely on the peace process in Sri Lanka, I would say hand in hand. I think in some period I saw more to Gopal than I saw my own wife. And that was nothing bad with my wife, and it was very, very good to see Gopal because his kindness and dedication to peace in Sri Lanka was enormous, and Tara, of course, being a dedicated environment activist. And let's also just one word about Sri Lanka, because as we all know, it's in the midst of a revolution. It's an enormous crisis. People have lost out enormously. The middle class and the poor in Sri Lanka are suffering tremendously. The rickshaw drivers are sitting 3 days in a queue to get gasoline to drive for 1 day. So the suffering is immense. And in the midst of the revolution, no one knows the outcome. But I still have the hope that out of this crisis in Sri Lanka can come a better Sri Lanka. Maybe we can see a next government in Sri Lanka being the first really government of Sri Lanka bridging the ethnic divide in the land, with a possible next president, Sajid Premadasa, who's the favorite in all polls, reaching out to Mr. Sumantram, who's the #1 Tamil leaders in Sri Lanka, and maybe they can form a government which is really encompassing all the main communities, the Sinhalese, Tamils, and the Muslims of Sri Lanka. Let's hope, let's cross fingers, and let's do everything we can to help Sri Lanka. And of course, they're counting upon India to help with economic resources, political advice, and investment. But it's a very dire situation, but it's not a situation without hope of a better Sri Lanka. One of the most crazy ideas I hear is the idea that everything was better before. You hear that all the time. Media basically tell you that everything in the world today is bad. And yes, indeed, there are many issues to criticize. There are many problems in the world. But if you look to the success story of Tamil Nadu, when the Brits left Tamil Nadu or India in the late 1940s, life expectancy in India was a little bit above 30, more or less 30. The number of Indians who could read and write was around 15% of the population. Now, of course, nearly all Indian boys and girls start schooling. The average life expectancy in India is 68. It will soon pass 70. And the life expectancy in the most successful state of Tamil Nadu is passing 75. It's an enormous progress. People could not expect to be as old as Gopal in the past. Now that opportunity is there for many people. And if you look at the most successful nations in the world, if you are so lucky to be a girl born in Seoul or in South Korea today, your life expectancy is 90 years. On average, you would be 90 in South Korea. And of course, India is moving fast in that direction. And I have the view that there are, as was said, there are enormous discrepancies within India. The difference between the most developed and the least developed states of India are bigger than between the most successful provinces of China and the least successful, or the most successful states and the poor states of America. But that problem can only be resolved with letting loose the most successful state. Let them be more successful and drag the others after them. Set out the good examples in Tamil Nadu or Karnataka, and let Bihar and UP and other parts of India learn from that, see how it can be done, and benefit from the investments which may come from the progress in these states. And my main focus is on the environment. And I believe that Tamil Nadu has an enormous opportunity to lead India and the world into this green future. Remind yourself, the size of Tamil Nadu is the size of Germany, population-wise. Tamil Nadu is one of the most successful developing economy anywhere in the world. 80 million people, rapid economic growth. Before the war in Ukraine, GDP in Tamil Nadu was exceeding Ukraine. Now it will, of course, be exceeding a lot Ukraine, and you are moving ahead, and you can show examples to other parts of the world as to how to get things done. And we all know that we are in the midst of an environment crisis. Pollution, climate change, and destruction of nature. Triple environment crisis. But the good news is that we have all the technologies, all the policies, and all the finances needed to resolve these crises. It's not like we don't know how to do it. We know exactly how to do it. We just need to get our politics together, our acts together, to resolve the crisis. That means for Tamil Nadu, massive tree planting, moving into electrical mobility, electrical two-wheelers, three-wheelers, and four-wheelers, investing in the sun and the wind, and remind you, these are domestic resources in Tamil Nadu. We are not depending on Russia or anyone else to deliver the energy from the sun. God is delivering the energy from the sun, and we can pick it right here in Tamil Nadu. And recycling economy, where we reuse things rather than throwing it away. We are at the moment, humanity are throwing away 99% of all clothes we are producing. How come? Why don't we use them again in renting systems? Or why don't we recycling them into new products? All this is feasible. We just need to move in that direction. We cannot just throw away a mobile phone when we don't need it any longer and want something more high-tech or better. Let's force Apple and Samsung and all the Chinese companies making the mobile phones, let's force them into using the components into new phones in a circular economy. So if you add up all this, tree planting, circular economy, renewable energies, electric mobility, and green agriculture. By the way, on green agriculture, the state of Andhra Pradesh is in the lead in India and the world. 6 million people in Andhra Pradesh has moved into what's called zero budget natural farming, which is using the residues from agriculture, cow dung, cow urine, to avoid the overuse of fertilizer, which is dragging the budgets of India and also polluting, when we overuse it, polluting the agriculture. So all these are areas of potential progress, and all these are areas where Tamil Nadu has the opportunity to take the lead and already is in the lead. So I'm very, very happy that the Tamil Nadu government seems to want to really move in this direction. MK Stalin has set this as a direction for the state. And of course, you need to mobilize people into this, because if people are not behind you, you cannot get anything done. You need the leadership from above, but you also lead the energies and excitement from below. Then you get it done, and you need the technologies and the scale which can only be delivered by business. But I'm very excited, happy to work with the government and the different agencies in Tamil Nadu to see how we can make this, what is done in Tamil Nadu, more well-known to the world, and how we can get more knowledge and ideas from other parts of the world to Tamil Nadu, so you can get a thought to whether these can be applicable here. And then we can make Tamil Nadu a really, really lead state of India and the world in the green transformation, which we all know we are in the start of. Thank you.
So before opening the floor for questions, one elephant in the room is what happened in Sri Lanka, because partly the natural farming and the way the farming structure in Sri Lanka changed had also contributed to the present economic crisis. And that is playing in a lot of people's mind. Therefore, they feel that what is a sustainable model, and where does we have an optimal mix between growth as well as retaining our nature? Because Sri Lanka example very clearly says that this focus on clean technology alone without having optimal mix had led to enormous economic distress. In that sense, what is your idea of optimal mix?
First, very briefly, I believe there were three main reasons for this enormous economic collapse of Sri Lanka. One is the sheer incompetence of the Rajapaksa family dynasty, and it's simply unsustainable to drastically increase government expenditure and reduce the taxes at the same time. That's a recipe for catastrophe everywhere. You cannot do both. You cannot spend a lot more money and reduce the income. And the family was not really interested in economics. They were interested in the political deals and political processes, and not in economics. Secondly, of course, Sri Lanka has been sheer unluck. The COVID-19 had a much bigger impact in Sri Lanka than most other places. A tourist-based economy, of course, suffering a lot more than a more industrial economy like Tamil Nadu from the collapse of tourism. And of course, the enormous amount of migrant workers in the Middle East coming from Sri Lanka, again, added to the economic problems of Sri Lanka. And thirdly, the fact that the Rajapaksas didn't try to make a national reconciliation, because if you had made a national reconciliation between Sinhalese and Tamils, you could have reduced the spending on the army. And there's an enormous drag of resources in a developing nations like Sri Lanka to have such an oversized army. An enormous amount of people working there, salaries and equipment. And of course, that drags resources which could be better used in other areas. So these, to me, are the three main factors: incompetence, unluck, and the lack of political reconciliation with Tamils. Then added to this, Gotabaya Rajapaksa, the president, all of a sudden decided to phase out fertilizer. That was done with an ecological argument that it's good for the agriculture to not use fertilizer. And of course, also it was also done because it would reduce spending of currency, because the fertilizer is imported. So it was one economic and maybe added an ecological argument. Because it was done again in a completely incompetent way. The way they're doing it in Andhra Pradesh is building stone upon stone, step by step, training the farmers in the new way of doing agriculture, letting one farmer see that another farmer on the other field is doing better than him or her, and learning from that. And that's a gradual process which can work. Just cutting off fertilizer from one day to the other, leaving the farmers with no training, no system, no money, no nothing. It's a recipe for disaster. So no one knows whether that policy could have been successful in Sri Lanka if it had been introduced over 5 years. But if it's introduced in 5 hours, it cannot be successful.
Last straw at the camel's neck. Against all this backdrop, this might have precipitated, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't go against organic farming. If I'm correct, that is the message. Gradually, slow and steady.
I'm absolutely in favor of this farming. I've been a couple of times to Andhra Pradesh and seen this with my own eyes. It's working beautifully, very well, improving the health of the farmers, even increasing the yield. They get more revenue, better income, and of course it's very good for climate and Mother Earth. But it cannot be done all of a sudden. You need to train people, get them behind you, get people to understand the thinking, and maybe most importantly, learn from each other. Because if you do well, your neighbors will come and see what you're doing, learn from it, and try to copy it. I tell you, I was once with the Minister of Agriculture of Vietnam. I think Vietnam is the most successful nation in the world when it comes to agriculture. They were an enormous rice importer. They are now the second biggest rice exporter in the world. They are the second biggest coffee exporter in the world. They have no tradition for coffee, but they're next to Brazil in coffee export. And I asked this Minister of Agriculture, how did you pull off this miracle? And he said, we needed to make sure that there was at least one very successful farm in every village in every district. Because if people see one farm doing very well, they flock there to learn, because no one wants your neighbor to do better than yourself. Because then you want to learn from it and try to do the same. And that's the way, if you want to move into green farming, people need to learn from each other.
Yes, Erik, you did extremely well even during the crisis. Now, this is the right time for reconciliation in Sri Lanka. What could we do, the Tamils? What could you do, the Norwegians? what would the European Union or what would the UN do? Is this the way that the crisis, opportunities in crisis that we could rebuild the society, maybe with organic farming again?
I think there is a huge opportunity in Sri Lanka now, mainly because the, let's call it, chauvinist Sinhala forces are dramatically weakened. Because there was a very strong chauvinist Sinhala tendency, which didn't care for Tamils, which wanted Buddhism to be the prime religion of the land, didn't want to recognize Tamil as an equal language with Sinhalese. That was very strong, and it was even stronger or exacerbated by the Rajapaksa family. That has now been drastically reduced in importance because people are focused on the economy, and of course this political tendency was so much linked to the rise of the Rajapaksas, and that's very little sympathy for that. So that gives a much wider window for peace-minded Sinhalese and Sinhalese with a wider horizon to really reach out to Tamils in a dialogue. Because no one knows what will happen, but there will probably be an all-party government in the short run. There will then be the election of a new president, or if they change the constitution, a new prime minister as the leader of the land. Most likely that will be Sachin Premadasa. He's the son of the former President Premadasa, who was killed by the Tamil Tigers. So there is a long history of all this. But Sachin Premadasa comes with a much more message of reconciliation. And Sumantaran, who's the lead Tamil politician in Sri Lanka now, has also indicated that an opportunity may arise for Sumantaran and the Tamil National Alliance to work with Sachin Premadasa in some kind of peace government, or at least peace constellation in Sri Lanka. And then, of course, the need to change the constitution and make Tamils having self-rule or self-government or in the north and east, and be an equal people in Sri Lanka. I mean, consider yourself, if you go to the police and the police can't speak your language, how would you feel? You're a Tamil and you want to report something to the police, and the police speak only Sinhala. This need to have a much wider horizon, and there have been a very narrow perspective in Sri Lanka, not really understanding that these are two, Sinhala and Tamil, are more different than Sinhala and Norwegian or Sinhala and English. It's a completely different language groups, and they need to find a. And they have lived together for thousands of years in Sri Lanka in peace. They can continue in the future, but you need a wider horizon, and I hope that Mr. Premadasa can provide that.
So on a completely different note, as a journalist who had been reporting on various international protocol, we'd always find that these international protocol have a shifting goalpost. So when we came into journalism, the key focus was on Kyoto Protocol. Therefore, from Kyoto Protocol to moving to adaptation or mitigation, when the international protocol is such a shifting protocol, goalpost, how do you think developing nations are going to formulate their policy? Can they keep getting ready to play on a chessboard where it's a constantly shifting goalpost? Therefore, from Kyoto Protocol to the present idea of carbon sink, how do you look at these multiple shifting goalposts?
Yeah, I will try to answer that question, but next question you put to the Environment Secretary, so we get more balance here. India should not at all accept any blame for climate change. That's, I mean, what happened in Glasgow, where some people were finger pointing to India, because India said that we should phase down coal rather than phase out coal, was completely crazy. Indian emissions per capita up to this year of 2022 is 1/30th part of North American. US and Canada emissions are 30 times Indians per capita up to this point. So India is not to be blamed for climate change. But India will suffer from climate change, and India will suffer more than the United States or China from climate change, because India has a poorer and more vulnerable population, but also because of the geography. It's very vulnerable to cyclones. If the Himalaya glaciers were to melt down, there would be an enormous negative development for northern India and the Ganga plain. So India is acting on climate for its own sake, not for someone else. And the good news, of course, now is that for the first time in human history, we have the win-win policy. In the past, there was a choice between development and environment, because you couldn't develop without burning coal. It's the only way to development. That's why they did it in the UK and the US, in Japan, in China, everywhere. Not because they load coal, but because it was the only way to rapid development. But now the price of solar is much lower than coal everywhere in the world. If you move from coal to solar, you do much better for the environment, much better for the health, but also much better for the economy, because you save money and you create more jobs. So we are, for the first time in human history, in a place where it's not a choice between economy and ecology any longer, but the win-win proposition of doing good for jobs and economy and doing good for the environment with the same policies. And that's why solar, of course, is not taking off very fast all over the world, why electric mobility is moving fast, and why we see this taking off everywhere. And of course, why this is also why this is now the business is not any longer seeing environment as a cost, but an opportunity. Simply, Mr. Adani and Mr. Ambani and all the Thakkins of Indian business can make more money if they get into the green, and then they can be taxed also for the benefit of the people of India.
Floor is open. Anybody has a question? Professor Jairanjan, please.
When we talk about this sustainable farming practices, and very often we come to hear about the experience of Andhra Pradesh, where they have shifted to a very large extent to the natural farming or organic farming kind of practices. Now, as far as Tamil Nadu is concerned, what is happening is the kind of social transformation that has taken place here over the past 50, 60 years has completely divorced livestock from farming. Earlier, livestock and farming were together, but that is not true anymore. Whoever has milk animals, even the composition of the bovine economy has completely changed here. Now it's essentially milk producing kind of bovine population that we have, and much of the agricultural operations, in fact, most of the agricultural operations have been mechanized because of the social transformation that we have had. Given this context, can we go back to the old system? That is my question, because when we go to the villages to study, what we find is you hardly find any cattle owned by those people who own the land. Cattle rearing has become an occupation by itself. The earlier kind of a practice of combining these two and the organic kind of a link that we had earlier, that has been completely broken. Now, how do we go back to that old days? We do not know, because that essentially was linked to the social organization of protection. Now, the social organization of protection is not there anymore. Like, for instance, if you take a landowner, let us say, who was owning, let us say, about 30 acres of land earlier, they would have had about 100 cattle to maintain that 30 acres of land. But now they own 30 acres of land, but not a single cattle. So that is the kind of practice now that has changed. Because to maintain 100 cattle, you need about 10 laborers who are attached to you. And we do not have any attached labor here anymore. Whereas in Andhra, they still have that. The kind of tenancy relations they have. Now, 60% of the land is rented out in Andhra Pradesh. Whereas the tenancy here is almost nil in Tamil Nadu. And you will not find any bonded labor in agriculture. Without that kind of an social system, you cannot sustain livestock of that kind. Now, where do you get the inputs that are required for this kind of sustainable farming that we are talking about? That is the major question that we face here. So essentially what I am saying is bereft of no, unless we take the social transformation that has taken place into account and find a solution for this problem, it will not work. That's my position.
I'm not sure I could fully follow the question because there's so much noise from the air conditioning, so I have some difficulties. But I understand it's about we cannot go back to old practice. And of course, I fully agree to that. I mean, there is no doubt that India will need to reduce the number of people working in agriculture, and drastically so. In the most developed nations in the world, approximately 5% of the population are employed by agriculture. And there's no way to prosperity for everyone in India if still a huge amount of people will do ineffective agriculture. So the issue is how we can combine effectiveness with better environment practices. I'm no expert on this. I mean, what they do in Andhra Pradesh is, of course, to use all the residues from agriculture as fertilizer. They use cow dung and cow urine. They don't do it in an ineffective manner. They use different plants which are insect repellent to avoid insect invasions rather than pesticides. They claim that it works well and that it improves health, increase yields, and do better for the environment. That suggests to some people there to look for themselves and to see to what extent this is applicable in Tamil Nadu. But of course, you cannot tell people that they should remain in poverty. While India's cities are big, they will continue to increase. We will see a much bigger part of Indian population living in urban areas. Lots of people think that is negative. I disagree. In Brazil, I think 85% of the people of Brazil are living in cities. And it's a functioning state. So of course, India will see a rapidly increasing urban population, but they should be allowed to live in livable, green, nice, prosperous cities, which we also see rapidly emerging in areas like Chennai or Hyderabad or Bengaluru or Pune, just to mention a few of them. And the many smaller cities, of course.
As an environment secretary, how do you look at the international protocols shifting goalposts, and how do you look at these standards which are emerging from the multilateral bodies?
Thank you so much. It's really an honor to be here. With regard to this question, the kind of compulsions that we have, I don't think it is really for a state like Tamil Nadu. I don't think it's really mandatory for us to kind of fall into any kind of a protocol. Of course, it's a national mandate. What I wanted to say here was that as someone who is heading this entire climate action, what I am observing in Tamil Nadu is that there is a lot of flexibility that has been given to the state government to kind of frame its own policy. For example, I personally believe, and I think it flows from the directives that have been given to us by our chief minister also, is that our foundation of the climate action is based on an idea that a government has to react fast, has to react innovatively, and has to react at the grassroots level. Our climate policy is based on these principles. So it's international or national. The state government's climate policy is based on this. So I'd like to just mention 3 important initiatives that government of Tamil Nadu has taken. And I have no doubt that these initiatives are really going to help the government react in a very fast manner. The first one is that, so the first thing is, how innovatively can you act on climate change? So I'm sitting here with Mr. Erik, who's, who has this repository of information, and I'm really hesitant to speak before him. But I definitely would like to mention that we believe that we needed a special purpose vehicle to act fast, to break the bureaucratic delays that may happen, in order to bring all the stakeholders at one platform. It was very important for us to create something innovative which will be in a position to give a clear direction to the climate action. So we have set up India's first climate company. It's a government company with the possibility of engaging with the private partners. This company is registered under Section 8 of the Companies Act. It is called as the Tamil Nadu Green Climate Company. This company is headed by the climate secretary, and it has stakeholders from various departments. So that is the first action. So that's at the state level. And at the district level, just about a week back, we have set up district level missions, which are headed by the district collectors. We also realized that while we are talking about climate action and all of these things, but is there someone at the district level who will lead this charge? Somebody who will talk to everybody, who will bring people together. Who will do that? So we have also designated a climate officer at the district level. And rather than creating a parallel structure, which will take its own time to kind of act on this, we have designated all the district forest officers as the climate officers. In any case, they are working in this sector. So to come back to your question, while there are protocols and we are mandated by the national guidelines, the fact is we feel that at the state level, it's the leadership which really matters, the political leadership. If we have a clear directive that we have in Tamil Nadu, I think we are in a better position to move forward effectively.
Now the floor is open. People can ask questions both through. Yes, Paul, please. Yeah, after you, sir. Yes, sir. Okay. Sir, you have to speak to the mic, please.
I want to introduce myself as a DFM consultant. DFM is designed for manufacturability. In short, it is called DFM. In short, it is called DFM. Designed for manufacturability. The new science developed in US military. It was promoted by first Bush to bring manufacturable products out of drawings. And that was the problem in the earlier defense DRDO at America. This Bush only encouraged to bring a philosophy and method. Two people joined together. They made a software itself. It was called DFMA. You can do it in my book. I am one of the pioneers in this science in India. I have formed a new philosophy for DFM itself. You want to read the book now? After a heart attack in 2018, my son in US advised me, please stop preaching DFM. I used to call me as innovation consultant also. He told me, you know the other side as innovation. You got to push that. I have sold books for 3 lakhs, but nobody. My DFM.
Sir, excuse me, could you come to the question, please?
Okay, I'm brief.
Yes.
From that year, I am into environment. I took up wind energy as a challenge. When more windmills are there in the sky, I used to question myself, why can't we promote small windmills? I am promoting small windmills. We are into retrofitting EVs to energy independent vehicles. Okay, we are into that. I will come back to you for more details. Thank you.
Pugal, please.
So I'm Pugal Gandhi, a lawyer by profession and coordinator for this Dravidian Professions Forum. My question is not a new one. So, development is always inversely proportional to environment. The more a society or a state or a nation is developed, the degradation to environment is more. So I think that proposition we all will agree. So with that, there is a huge debate between the developed nations, developing countries and underdeveloped countries. Developed countries have become developed by exploiting their environment. So this is when we talk about technology, the new advancement in technology or the new invention in technology is also one of the characteristic features of capitalism. Because capitalism thrives or survives by selling the new technologies to other countries. In this regard, how can we match this? Because when we talk about climate change, how can we say that, for example, countries like India or even say continents like Africa, which has got virgin environments, this is kind of a neo-colonization which prevents the countries from developing. And this capitalist markets is trying to sell new technologies to these countries. Where are we going to draw a line? This is my first question, number one. The second question is to our environment secretary. How are we going to draw a line with respect to this? How are we going to balance this selling of technologies in the name of climate change? And why are we not exploiting our own natural resources, which is available in plenty? Because, for example, I come from a district called Nadu, Kanyakumari district, where this district is near to the Western Ghats, which is a biodiversity or whatever we call it as eco-sensitive zone. So all the laws, even if you want to construct a house which is more than 2 floors, you need to go to Haka board, which is actually an impractical thing. Going to Haka board. So suddenly, most of the buildings there are, which means unapproved. So suddenly, if an officer comes there without even understanding why people are constructing more than 2 floors, there will be an issue. So how are we trying to differentiate? How are we trying to balance this between the needs of capitalistic tendencies and also the needs of a growing economy like ours?
I think the old world where environment was basically something pushed to the world by the developed nations and where it was seen as a hampering development in developing nations is very much the 20th century. 21st century is about all the win-win policies, good for the economy and good for the environment at the same time. And this is particularly true for the 2 biggest and most important developing nations, China and India. And let me just give you the figures for how fast China has moved in this area. Last year, 80% of all solar panels in the world were produced in China. 60% of all new solar energy in the world was produced in China, not in Germany, not in California, not in Arizona, in China, 60%. 80% of all offshore wind last year came in China. 80% of all new hydropower in the world last year came in China. 70% of all electric batteries are made in China. If you happen to buy a Tesla, well, half the value of that car is the battery. Half, maybe between 40% and half. And that battery most certainly is made in China. So you buy a car which is made by Elon Musk in California, but half the value is the battery made in China. So of course the Chinese see this as an enormous opportunity for economic progress, for dominating markets, for taking market shares, creating value for their own nation by going green. That's why President Xi of China has also coined the slogan, green is gold, meaning going green, you create value, jobs, prosperity in society. India has the opportunity to be the competitor to China in this. I see now lots of Chinese companies are investing massively in making solar panels. Which, I mean, India should not import all the solar panels from China, should make them themselves. India should not import all the batteries from China. It should make the batteries himself by Tata or Adani or Ola in Bengaluru or all these companies which are now coming up. And India will very, very soon be the second biggest solar nation in the world, next to China. It's a long shot to compete with the big as China, the second for sure, very fast. So I see this as an enormous opportunity for India to create value, jobs, opportunities for people, skilled, trained people. If we don't do that, well, if India doesn't get up early in the morning, or if Europe doesn't get up early in the morning, and the Chinese will take all these markets, and China is still a developing country. So let's compete with the Chinese. Let's see the inspiration from them, but India can do as well as China, and you will do it by creating this value back home here in India, because then, of course, you create the jobs while going green. these are just some examples. Again, when China has promised to do tree planting from today to 2030, an area the size of Belgium every year. Belgium is not the biggest nation in the world, but still it's sizable if you plant a new Belgium every year. Because India is also, the state of Telangana is Indian leader on tree planting. They have increased the tree cover by 3% over the last few years. And that's because of, as you say, it's policies. The government of Telangana want tree planting to happen and inspire people and push people to do it. And then it happens. And Hyderabad, by the way, is also now a tree city of the world with massive green parks in Hyderabad. Again, because of government policies.
My question is, it need not be green always. When you have got abundant natural resources, so your answer is with respect to how China has converted itself into a service industry or manufacturing hub. But my question is, it need not be green always. When you have abundant natural resources, why can't we exploit the natural resources to a certain extent? Because when natural resources are freely available.
So I believe you should do both. I mean, in Norway, we are, of course, exporting our natural resources. We want to be seen, for instance, as a battery for Europe, where the hydropower, we have a lot of hydropower in Norway, can be a battery for the wind and solar power in Europe. I mean, the sun is not shining 24 hours a day. The wind is not blowing every day. When sun or wind is low, they can tap into hydropower from Norway as a battery for Europe. And that's, of course, exporting a Norwegian natural resource for income. So I think for India, there's no contradiction. India should develop these for its own purposes back home, but also see an enormous opportunity for export to other markets and creating jobs and value at home by that.
Yes. So, I mean, taking from where Mr. Erik had left, your question about industries, I would like to take that first. You said, how do you bring a balance between industries, the development and the environmental? So I would like, rather than giving this very typical answer, I would like to see, so why can't we work with industries? Why can't they follow green practices? So I'll just give you an example. So you have these leather factories which were closed down, as you know, in Ranipet, thanks to a Supreme Court judgment, which actually ensured that all this pollution which was being created at that point of time, it was contained. Today, when you go to Ranipet, you have all of these leather tanneries. They have the zero liquid discharge installed. It's nothing but a technology which has helped an industry from becoming a most polluted industry to an industry which is not creating any pollution at all. So, I just wanted to give you this example because that's the way to go forward. That's the way to, kind of look into future. You need to use technology. You have to put those benchmarks very strongly. It's not that you can't have the industrial development, but you still have the technologies available. You have those policies available. The industry should follow it. In Tamil Nadu, our government has announced that we will follow a practice of green benchmarking. How would you do that? You will incentivize industries for following green practices. So suppose today you develop a practice where you have a kind of a benchmarking, say 5-star. So everybody starts with, some people start with 1 star, some people start with 2 star. Ultimate goal is you should have a microforest created within your premises. You should not pollute. You should have a zero discharge. You should create your own energy by putting solar energy or purchase wind energy. It is doable. So that is where we want to go. We want to work alongside with industries, with farmers, with people, find solutions, work alongside and see to it that, they go towards that direction. To the last point that you mentioned about bringing a balance, for example, you said if you are, say, in the buffer zone or you are in an eco-sensitive zone, then you are not in a position to kind of construct a 3-story house or something like that. Actually, it is something which is very important because I worked in Nilgiris for a very long time. And I continue to be associated as the Secretary Forest. I find that really constructing very large infrastructure, either here in a city like Chennai, when it comes to constructing houses, for personal residences, etc., is actually not sustainable. I'll give you a small example. It is certainly, I don't think there is any question of bringing a balance between development and environment when it comes to protection of your biodiversity or wildlife. I don't think you should even think of balance. It's always weighed in the favor of environment and animals. You will not have them. You will lose that entire biodiversity. The rate at which we are losing our forest cover, it's not in Tamil Nadu, but throughout country or throughout the world, it's dangerous. So coming to this question where people who are living in the eco-sensitive zone, I do agree that they have certain inconveniences, but constructing a very big house or a large industry or a polluting industry, in 3 to 4 years of time, you will find that it is not going to be sustainable, even for people who are going to live there. So that is why these kind of rules are there. But yes, governments have to step forward, make sure that the existing rights, traditional rights, tribals, people who are inhabitants of a forest, people who are forest dwellers who have been there, all these government acts are providing for protection of those rights. But it is, I think, not proper to think that, in the name of development, we keep on expanding in the buffer zones or eco-sensitive zone. Ultimately, you will not have any forest to call, a sustainable development at all. That's what I feel. Thank you.
So, Tara Gandhi, please.
Thank you.
Yeah.
This is for Erik. Yes, hello. Thank you so much. We really enjoyed your very appreciated your talk. You mentioned 4 or 5 different aspects that are important for sustainable development and climate change at the same time. India is full of rivers, and Tamil Nadu has some beautiful big rivers, and Chennai itself has 5 rivers. Now, how important would you place these protection of these rivers, their ecology, their ecological aspects of it for climate change and sustainable development? How important would you place this?
I think it's incredibly important from basically every aspect of life. I mean, the rivers are the lifeline of life. If you look to civilizations of humanity, they're nearly all grown up near the big rivers. I mean, Ganga is, of course, the prime example in India, but there are many others. If you go to China, along the Yangtze and the Yellow River are the lifelines of China, and you can go around the world exactly the same. And it's important for agriculture, for so many species. So it's absolutely critical. And to be very frank, of course, India has a big job to do here, because Indian rivers are, many of them, very, very polluted, and they need to be restored. But when they are restored, there will be an enormous benefit for life, benefit for health, economic benefit, because tourists and others will come in much bigger number when they are restored. So while it cannot happen like that, it's a huge program for India. I've been quite a lot in touch with the Ganga, the people who are trying to restore Ganga. They have a long-term plan, and I think it's moving, even if it needs to move faster. I know it's not always popular in India to put China as an example, but the way the Chinese has attacked this over the last few years is absolutely amazing. They have done many places in 5 to 10 years what we did in 30 to 40 years in Europe. True, the Rhine in Germany is also now very clean, but it took many years. If you go to the Zhejiang province south of Shanghai, they cleaned up and rivers which they were called the milky rivers, not because they were healthy like milk, because they were white like milk, white from pollution. Now Absolutely clean. You send your grandchild or a child into swimming, drinking from the river. Tourists are coming in huge numbers. They have moved some apartments, they have moved and transformed the industries. So a lot which need to be done. They've also been quite innovative. They have established what's called the river chief system, which means that for every river or for every part of a river, there is a chief. And let's assume Tara Gandhi is the chief. Then there will be a poster with your name and your telephone number, and you're the chief of that river. And if people see something illegal, see something which shouldn't happen, or if they see a problem which can be resolved, well, there's a number to call. That's your number. If you cannot resolve it, at least you can contact other people in the government to help resolve this thing. They have now embarked upon a complete 10-year fishing ban in the Yangtze River, which is an enormous ecosystem. Will be short-term pain for sure for China and for the fishermen there, but in the long term, of course, the ecosystem will come back. We know it will bounce back. And they have also now a fishing ban in the upper part of the Yellow River. So if you look at the determination they are putting into cleaning up the rivers, you are seeing very, very fast results. It may take longer in India, but I'm absolutely sure that if we see 20, 30 years into the future, Indian rivers will be much, much cleaner than they are now. And Tamil Nadu again can lead also here. Over to you.
I think so. I just wanted to mention that in Chennai, Buckingham, Adyar, and Kuam, all efforts are being made at this point of time to clean them up under a program which is, and for that special purpose vehicle has also been set up. The work is already going on. A massive scale of rehabilitation of people to kind of move them from the banks of these rivers is already underway. And there are several departments, all of us are working together under the Chennai River Restoration Trust, CRRT. So government has set up a special purpose vehicle that the work is going on, and we are very sure that I think a lot of progress has already been made. When it comes to the water bodies, one of the most important initiatives I thought it is time to highlight is that one of the largest, what you call it, Sadupunilam, that is in Tamil, which is actually the wetland or a marshland, is located in Chennai, which is the Pallikarnai marsh, located in the heart of the district. It used to be at some point of time about 6,000 hectares. Today, it is only about 600 hectares that we have of the Pallikarnai marsh. But the good news is that whatever 600 hectares is available with us, it has, the forest department has already got into action and cleaned up and restored a major part of Pallikarnai marsh. And our chief minister recently inaugurated an eco park. Every weekend, a place which used to be a dump yard, a place which used to be not utilized at all. Every weekend, we have 3,000 to 5,000 people, children, old people, visiting Pallikarnai marsh and enjoying the eco park. So while it will be a very tall claim to say that we can do it in a year, cleaning of all rivers, etc. I think it will be a very tall claim. But I can tell you, madam, that all efforts are being made by three important departments of the government, which is the Water Resources Department. A major work is going on in removing encroachments from water bodies. And thanks to certain directives which have also been given by the Honorable High Court of Madras, the work for removal of restoration of water bodies, encroachment removals, under the Tamil Nadu Wetlands Mission, again, the first mission anywhere in India, we have taken up 100 wetlands as our objective to make sure that we completely restore these 100 water bodies. And Pallikarnai marsh, we have started our work from Pallikarnai marsh. So, and out of 100 water bodies, the notification for 29 water bodies has already been prepared in a record time. We have already sent 13 proposals to Ramsar Secretariat to declare those places as under the Ramsar Convention. And I would finish by saying that Tamil Nadu has, at this point of time, had 16 bird sanctuaries. In just 6 months' time, 2 new bird sanctuaries, which is at Kaduveli and another one at Nanjarayar, has been notified by the government of Tamil Nadu. So I think there is a lot of excitement, a lot of action, and I'm quite inspired and motivated to take all this forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Since this is a hybrid one, we would like to take 2 questions from our online participants. Could you just unmute Jayanandan, please? Jayanandan, please go ahead with your question.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. I would like to the first question is to Mr. Erik Solheim. This is with regards to the solar power economy, right? So currently, we have states like Tamil Nadu, Telangana, which are focusing on e-vehicle policy. I mean, we are having this e-vehicle policy that is coming up, and these states are attracting a lot of, these companies, which produces two-wheelers to start with. But the question is, within the ecosystem of the solar, right from raw materials to components to batteries to the technical know-how, are we pushing ourselves into a vulnerable zone wherein the state is dependent on very few countries to make this entire, the ecosystem work? On the contrary to the current automobile ecosystem that we have in Chennai, fairly indigenized, in terms of in terms of these technical, the technical know-how. But that is not the same for electrical vehicles. So that is the first question. Are we putting ourselves in a slightly vulnerable zone? And the second question is about, in terms of, the know-how per se, the know-how around the solar, the solar energy as well as the solar, vehicle ecosystem. Do you see Quad, formation investing to sort of de-vulnerabilize the entire logistics? So currently we have very few countries controlling the raw materials and other aspects of solar energy economy. But do you see Quad sort of like trying to sort of untangle or make it more decentralized, in a sense, develop much more nodes in the network to ensure that the move to solar happens without any glitch, without seamlessly? So those are the 2 questions to you, sir.
Yeah, these are great questions. So you're obviously very knowledgeable in this area. It's not like the move to electric vehicles are without problems. Obviously, we need to establish an economy for batteries where they can be recycled and used again and not just thrown away. And we're also making ourselves dependent on some nations where the mining is not done in a proper manner, like, say, the Democratic Republic of Congo, which is one of the poorest and most poorly run nations in the world. So there are challenges. But on the other hand, the opportunity for the world to move into electric mobility is enormous, creating more jobs, creating much better air, less pollution in the cities, and of course, reducing climate change. So we need to move in that direction. At the moment, the market for battery is 100% more or less dominated by China, Korea, and Japan. I think these 3 nations are basically making every battery for electric vehicles in the world, and China is dominant. That needs to change, and it will change. The car industry is so central to Europe, so over time you will see a huge amount of battery factories being established in Europe to produce European batteries for European markets. And as I see it, obviously India needs to do the same. It can learn from China and Korea, and Japan, it can get investments from these nations, but India needs to establish a battery economy for India, for Indian cars, but also potentially to export to other markets in the world. And this is now happening. I just saw last week Mahindra in Mumbai had got a substantial investment from British investors who want to invest in battery production in Mumbai. But if India is not doing this, it will simply skip a very important opportunity to develop its own business, and I'm sure it will happen. On the solar economy, India has the lowest price of solar anywhere in the world. India can produce the cheapest energy anywhere in the world from solar. It's indeed the cheapest energy which has ever existed on planet Earth, solar energy in India now. You are mentioning a number of issues. Yes, you need a grid. That grid may be developed by governments. You need the battery systems for the times when there are where there is little sun. So for sure there are issues, but overall it's an enormous opportunity to create more jobs, get better health, and do good for the environment if we move into a solar economy. And that solar economy needs to be both huge solar plants producing electricity for the grid, but also cost all this village-based solar, the small solar, roof-based solar. Why don't we put solar on all schools, on all parking lots, everywhere we can make solar? A very inspiring example, you may be aware of it, is the Kerala Kochi Airport, the first all-solar airport in the world. And I know the guys there was very interesting because these guys were not green. They were not environmentalists. They just looked into the notebook and figured out that the cheapest energy they could get in the state of Kerala for the airport, that was solar. So they started expanding the solar on the parking lots in the area around. And then, well, lots of people rushed to them and said, oh, great, you're doing great for Mother Earth. And then they became environmentalists and, of course, very, very proud of what they had achieved in Kochi. Now we see this taking off in many parts of India. New Delhi Metro will be the largest extent run by solar. It's the first all-solar rail station in Assam. And of course, Tamil Nadu and the southern states of India is in the lead here and can develop this very, very fast, both small rooftop-based, village-based, and the big plants. Maybe we can get a Tamil Nadu perspective.
No, I think that's, you already said it. Thank you.
Hello.
Ramasamy, please.
Yes.
Please go ahead with your question, Mr. Ram.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Erik and the Environment Secretary for the Sunday evening amidst your busy schedules. I have a few questions as a biologist. See, we have been following the model of centralized production and delivery that has really resulted in the high-tech productions and the environment pollutions. But for that, if you take the Dravidian community, they have been living in this land for at least 15 to 20,000 years. And their survival was mostly based on dryland farming. And also I was happy to know from the secretary that about 30 water bodies have been identified for reclaiming. I just wish to mention something here. I used to tell these working with the tribal and other populations that empower them in their own land. See, the Neolithic revolution, the agricultural revolution, and whatever Erik said about the river-fed civilizations, only after that, there was a phenomenal exponential growth of the human population. Now, unfortunately, with the advent of all these technologies, the native species or native way of productions have been reduced to nil almost. For example, I can tell you one example. The lotus is a delicacy in Thailand. The lotus nowadays we see in many ponds in Tamil Nadu as well, but we never use them as a food. Every pot is edible. Now, then they can also, these water bodies can host variety of fish species also. So now the unfortunate thing is the fish culture in Tamil Nadu, or for that matter in India, is not considered as an agriculture. The electricity is not provided to them free of cost, and these are all the problems. And we have a very long coastline and freshwater bodies. If this can be put into use, that will be really less harming to the environment, natural way of growing food, and sustainability of the local population. This is one. I would like to know the comment of both of you. Then the second one is, in the mode of subsistence, the rice has come in, the wheat has come in, and they are good, sustainable, they are storable. But these are all only in the recent, maybe 7,000 years or so. Now, we do have other modes of subsistence. For example, if you go to northeast of India, in Impal, anywhere, you go to Shandy, you will have basket full of these cocoons, silkworm worms, and which people used to buy, fry, and eat. For that matter, cockroach is the best proteinaceous food ever available, very easy to produce. And you would have seen children earlier days in the seacoast eating sea cucumbers and frogs. So the problem here is the cultural for the sustainability, which we face in this country. And I do not know the solution for that. Anyway, in my opinion, going the natural way, considering the past, the Pandya period, the Kanmai, and then Kulangar, that kind of sustenance was practiced. So I wish the government takes up some of these things. And unfortunately, the water bodies, most of them, even now in this rainy season, I see many of the water bodies dry in Tamil Nadu. And water holding capacity has been reduced to 1/3 in most of them. So something needs to be done. I request the secretary. Thank you. I want your response.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. I think part of it I had already kind of responded when I spoke earlier. It's about a big effort that is being made throughout the state about the restoration of water bodies. But I also would like to mention to you, I think there are two important things. I did not mention about the challenges that we are facing in our fight against climate. Of course, one of the biggest challenges, which I think you also touched upon, the traditional way of dealing with the life and how it used to be much more eco-friendly and how, the things have changed. So I wanted to say that, one of the biggest challenges we face is the management of garbage, the kind of segregation which is not happening at source, and the kind of garbage that is being thrown in the water bodies. Let us be very honest about it. It's actually not, it needs to happen. We need to make sure that there is a culture of people being responsible for the garbage that they are generating. They're segregating it at home, and it doesn't reach the landfill. One of the biggest landfills, I mean, if you go to Perungudi, where the biomining is happening, we are doing a big scale biomining on behalf of the GCC is doing it. Your heart will break because you will see the kind of legacy waste that you have and the tons and tons of plastic that it's coming out of that Perungudi dump yard. I mean, I think everybody should go to that dump yard. Once you visit the dump yard, you will actually not throw even a single piece of plastic outside. It's that kind of a place. So I think government is trying, to kind of bring in that kind of a people's movement to make sure that they are responsible for the garbage that is being generated. We have launched something called a people's movement called Mindu Manjapai. We are trying to, it's like back to basics and requesting people to kind of go back to the days of Manjapai, which used to be just, simple, humble, traditional yellow cloth bag. People used to keep using it till used to get torn, so that kind, we need that kind of a huge people's campaign where they understand that the use of plastic, etc., is so dangerous. Studies have found that the plastic is in our bodies. It's in our blood. It's in the food that we eat. It's in the air that we breathe. So we are trying to, kind of move towards that. But I would not like to, never would like to say, that there is something that we can't do. It cannot be done. I think a lot is being done at this point of time. All municipalities, no, not all, most municipalities are in the process of doing biomining, the segregation at home. It is not perfect at this point of time. Last point is that government of Tamil Nadu has also announced that 10 beaches would be, cleaned up completely, and under the program called the Blue Beach program of the Beams program that we have. Kovalam has already been certified as a blue beach, where it has been cleaned up, handed over to communities to maintain it. So, 10 more beaches, we are taking it up. So the last thing is that without people's participation, it's impossible to achieve long-term sustainable results.
Thank you very much. We'll just take one more question before wrapping up. No, sir, one question first for him. Yeah, just to him, please. Yeah.
You mentioned a lot about China dominating the battery scene or the electrical industry for solar. Much of this is also, due to the huge vocational skilling which is available among the people living in those specific regions, the kind of training they've had, the kind of skilling that's been given to those people living in China. For example, when Tim Cook was asked the question, why does iPhone get shipped more out of China? He mentioned that if he could pull in a room full of engineers in this particular city, let's say in California, he would be able to only fill up 10 seats. And if it was in China, he could have an audience of more than 100 people attending those meetings, because these people were highly skilled in that one particular work involved in designing the entire chip. So I'm just trying to understand how much a part of skilling is going to play a part in bringing up the sustainable, production goals for our state as well as for the country.
No, I think you are right that China has put a lot of effort into skilling. If you go 20 years back, all the members of the standing committee of the Chinese Communist Party, which is the top body of the land, all of them were engineers, without any exception. So because they brought this engineering attitude into society, that you can always build something, you can do something, and you need to find practical solutions to it. Now you find many more lawyers or political scientists, etc., in the top levels. But of course, you could not get into that body by being an real estate mogul, as you can do becoming the president of the United States. That would be impossible. So I think this overall has served China well, and I think we can all learn from this kind of attitude to get things done in a practical way. And also, if you look to China and India, when Manmohan Singh started reforms in India in the 1990s, because there are in my view, there are three main factors for development. In Korea, Singapore, China, India, Vietnam, wherever you put political leadership matters a lot. If you don't have the drive from the top leaders, in the case of India, Prime Minister Modi, many people like him, but you need from the top, and you need the leadership from M.K. Stalin, from the top leaders of the state of Tamil Nadu. Set the direction, regulate markets, inspire people. If you want people to be exercised on the grassroots level, you need political leaders to inspire them. Second, a market-based economy must be market. If there are not markets, you fail. That's the problem in so many African countries. There really isn't a market. And we cannot do state-run economies always fail, as China failed until 1980, and as India had difficulties with development before Manmohan Singh put in place a market-based economy in India in the 1990s. And thirdly, as you say, massive focus on education and skilling. There are hardly anyone in the world who are extreme poor and can read and write at a high level. Very few, close to zero. Nearly all the extreme poor in the world are also illiterate. So bringing education to everyone is critical for this development. And wherever you look in the world, political leadership, market-based economy, and focus on education, I think are the three main components for development.
Really the last question. With that, I will invite my friend.
Thank you very much to both of you for doing this thing and educating all of us with your thoughts. Thank you for bringing up the Blue Beaches initiative that you have, because I live in the United States. Every time I come here, I love to go to Besanagar Beach, but every time I also go, I take pictures and I take videos of why is this beach so dirty. I cannot bring my children. I've gone to Marina Beach as well. I grew up in the Mylapore area and I've been there. It doesn't smell good. So the things that I've actually seen is during the Chennai floods, as well as during the Jallikattu and any other kind of movement that the youth have actually initiated, or there has been some kind of a spark. The entire community has come together. What is it that we are missing in terms of the cleanliness and the garbage issue which we have?
Thank you. Well, I think I don't think I'll be able to do justice to this question, but I can definitely tell you that I 100% agree with you when you say that the leadership has to come from youth. Absolutely no absolutely no doubt about it. But what are we doing to do? What are we doing to involve youth in environment sector? Are we bringing young people in climate change? Are we really creating an environment in which they feel inspired? They feel that they have a role to play? What are we doing about it? I do not know what others are doing, but in Tamil Nadu, again, for the first time ever, we are starting an initiative. And I'm very sure that this will definitely engage the attention of young people. We have brought a program called Green Fellowship. It's called Chief Minister's Green Fellowship Program. And what we are planning to do, select bright, young, passionate men and women and put them for 2 years in every district to work alongside the district administration. Let them learn, let them give a feedback to us. Let them work with all the government program and let them look at every program with a climate lens. So investing in their training, in their education, in their capacity building, and at the end of 2 years, getting about 40, and that's the number we have worked about, 40 green thinking young people is what we aim to. So I think once it becomes a regular practice, these young individuals could be catalysts, who would go to different parts of the country and make the change. This is one small step we have taken in this direction, but yes, I think we need to do more. Thank you.
May I request Poor Gandhi to give a vote of thanks, please.
In fact, this is the first physical interactive session of our Dravidian Professionals Forum and Roja Muthaiah Research Library, because before this, we used to do panel discussions on various topics. And last panel discussion, which we did is somewhere, I think 1 month before. Before that, because the reason is we started this Dravidian Professionals Forum basically to unite and bring together the professionals who believe in social justice across the world. But we started when COVID was at its peak, and we were able to do only the online panel discussions. Initially, it's in the year 2018, when we launched it, when it was launched by our Finance Minister, Dr. P.T.R. Palanivel Thiagarajan, as part of DMK, in fact. But within a week, we got around 3,600 applications from various people. When we scrutinized all these applications, it was from party people. So we don't want to get into this party business. Therefore, we stopped everything, and in the year 2019, we relaunched it, keeping this organization at arm's length. Even at that point of time, many thought that we are going to talk the conventional Dravidian language. But we started with international discussions like it's a climate change, women's rights, center-state relation, federalism, even COVID management, vaccine inventions. So bringing in people from across the world. So with this, I would like to thank Mr. Erik Solheim for his time and enlightening us on the clean energy, green energy, and sustainable development. I would also like to thank our Environment Secretary for coming all the way and taking her time out of her busy schedule, Ms. Madam Supriya Sahu. I would also like to thank Thiru Gopal Krishna Gandhi sir for coming and attending this event. I have to thank also our Panneer. Without him, we couldn't have come to this level, and our Sundar Ganesan for hosting us, and my fellow coordinator Dharanidharan for him. Thanks for everyone participating. Thank you.